what people don't realize is that 20% of United States GDP comes from walkable neighborhoods in its top 35 metro areas. 20% comes from these tiny urban areas. And it's, if you think about the city of London, right, which is this 1 square mile, which makes so much for our GDP. If you think about Silicon Valley in the United States, which has a higher GDP than Finland, just that small area of the United States. The world-leading experts come together in one place, and you've got universities, you've got a private sector, you've got a highly skilled workforce. They all come together to produce something more than the sum of their parts. That is how Silicon Valley has done the amazing thing it's done. That is how the square mile has done the amazing thing that it's done. These are the wins that we can do. It's not about spending more money. It's about spending it way more efficiently and getting much more out of it.
Right, well, I can tell you about that. So, as Colin was saying, we went up to see the Raiders, and look at me, and and we had this idea of buying the local football club, and. No, there's no club in England that had used Skull and Crossbones as their logo, and I was like,
oh, really?
Why not?
Yeah,
I mean, it's Skull and Crossbones are cool. You mentioned St. Pauli,
yeah.
You got the Raiders, and they always look cool, so we went with it. We actually, this is our so we stole an idea of St. Pauli, so that's our tunnel.
Oh, amazing!
So that's
certainly going to make some feel a bit intimidated coming out of there.
Well, we played death metal as well, so the players turn up and they walk down the tunnel, and it's dark red, all the graffiti, blaring death metal. I stole the idea of St. Pauli.
Testosterone levels rise.
Yeah, well, St. Pauli are more of they're quite a socialist club.
They are, yeah.
Whereas we're more anarchist in the way we do things.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been great fun.
And you can build a real brand. That's what St. Pauli have done, right?
Yep.
Around the world, they're a second Bundesliga team, but around the world they're renowned. You can do so much with that.
Well, we sell. I mean, Connor does the merch. What, 70% goes to the US? Yeah.
Really?
70% goes to the US. We've got there's a supporters club in Minnesota. Bear in mind, when we bought this club, we were 10th tier English football club.
Yeah.
We had a supporters club in Minnesota. There's one guy called Edgar. He comes over every year as his annual holiday, and he's like running down the side of the pitch with a flag. But yeah, no, we've got this because it's the Bitcoin club.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got a bit of a following with that. So yeah, no, it's been cool. The rail thing, though, I'll tell you the story of that. We wanted to change the name of the club because there's Bedford Town. We got confused with each other. Yeah. And I was watching Inter Miami in America, and I was like, that's a cool idea. Let's go with Rail Bedford. And so we got all the merch designed, big order for merch in, get everything sorted. And we went to put the club register into the FA system, and it wouldn't accept it. There was already a Rail Bedford.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were a Sunday League side playing the fifth tier of Sunday League football, but you can't have duplicate names. So we had to approach him and buy the name. I met him, by the way, the other day, Con. But yeah, we had to go and buy the name of him. So there you go.
You should consider putting a crown on top of the skull. For the Real.
People take. So I got once asked about the story why Real, and I on the spot I made up this story about this battle that was fought against the Spanish in Bedford.
Amazing.
And they went back with their tails between their legs, but honoured us and referred to us as Rail Bedford because of the leadership of the army from. Just fucking making this shit up. we got a game because you're from Buckinghamshire, right?
Originally from Hampshire, but I live in Buckinghamshire now, yeah.
So I used to live in High Wycombe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's really close.
I went to university there.
Wow.
And Beaconsfield are in our league.
Okay.
So we've got them soon.
And you played Chesham recently, didn't you?
Our women's side played Chesham. We beat them 12-2. Our women's side's really good. But no, our
Chesham's really bad.
Yeah. Well, then the men's side's okay. I'm trying to think where they are. What division they are?
I haven't been following it, I have to admit.
The National League? Yeah, decent size.
Really?
Yeah.
National League? Wow.
Yeah. It's a nice part of the world you live in.
It is. No, it's lovely up there. Got to say, and obviously really nice connections into London as well. Yes. Makes it nice and easy.
Well, your book, which I received not with enough time to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I read the kind of reviews at the start.
Yes.
I read the intro, which immediately grabbed me. And then I kind of looked through the chapters, and you've got those great chapter summaries at the start, which are very helpful. And then I focus all on the tax. But I was like, hold on a second, this just all makes sense, because we're at this weird time, right, where everything appears to be completely fucked and getting worse. And I tell you where it spoke to me as a business owner and a taxpayer. I'll give you one anecdote. Then really the interview should be you. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
One part of it where you talked about the tax code, how complicated it is, how much time we spend on it. So I spend an awful lot of money with my accountants doing my VAT return for every one of my business and my annual returns. I've got 4 businesses. I'm pushing close to £100,000 a year. And that's just on the bookkeeping required to do the tax returns.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, that's such a misallocation of capital. One tiny part. And I could give you hundreds. But I was like, So anyway.
And just on that one, by the way, it's not just a misallocation of capital. It's also a misallocation of your brain time.
Yep.
Because that time could be spent doing something creative. The stress that is involved in that actually diminishes your ability to do these things. And when you look at large businesses versus small businesses like yours, you've got to spend a lot more time thinking about that rather than growing your business, thinking about future opportunities. Large businesses, they can just shove it away in a tax team and they get on with it, and they're not nearly as affected by it. So these really complex regulations, it is in favor of the Goliaths at the expense of the Davids.
Well, it's such a great point. So recently with the new Labour budget, I know I've got friends, people who are Labour voters, and very defensive of it. And to most of them, my answer is, go and run a business and then come back to me and tell me what you think of this budget. And by the way, that's not me supporting Conservatives, because I think Conservatives over the last 14 years haven't really been a Conservative party. I know you're a councillor, and I'm historically, that's the only party I've ever voted for, but I haven't voted in the last 2 elections. I think 3 maybe because of this, but we can get into all of that. But I've got 4 businesses, this podcast, I own a bar.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Everyone wants to own a bar, don't they?
It is cool. No, it's mainly stress, actually. You're trading stress to be cool. Obviously, I own the football club.
Yeah, that's cool.
And we have an events business. We do 2 events a year. But we're trying to open a coffee shop at the moment in our town centre. A 5th one, but it's part of the football club. So we want a club shop in the town centre where people can buy merch, tickets for games, and generally ads as an advert right in the town centre. Our goal is to get a team in the Football League. That's the big plan, right? But a club shop won't make enough money to pay for itself. So what a lot of other people do, like the rugby club in Bedford, they have a coffee shop, and the coffee shop pays for you to have the club shop.
Yeah.
But I'm going through the process of basically setting this up. As an experienced business owner, we set a budget, which is we separate out our CapEx and our OpEx. Our investment at the start is probably up to 100 grand in terms of like the fit out and stock, what we require. And then, we have our ongoing capital requirements and our cash flow. And I'm running into the bureaucracy, the red tape, and the tax code, the part of the tax code that makes it very hard to make a profitable business. So imagine there was no government, I would open up the shop and my cost would be my cost for the fit out and requirements, and then my ongoing costs of staff and stock. And it'd be fairly easy to make a profit with a coffee shop. But I have my business rates, which I pay ahead of having the business. I have quite new, complicated employment laws, which I have to plan for, which includes a higher minimum wage now and holiday pay for everybody. And then we have the various other taxes and regulations we have to follow. And I look at all the empty shops in our town centre, Thomas, and I think, how many of those could be businesses? How many new businesses could be launched if the government just didn't get in the way of everything? So that's my starting point for you. Oh,
you're not going to be that surprised to learn that I largely disagree with that. I've spent my career building businesses from the ground up. That's always what I've done. And I think the Labour front bench has either no experience in the private sector, certainly not in the past 10 or 15 years, or very, very little. I don't know
Go
the
and find the
exact
tweet.
statistic.
I literally tweeted this out. You're going to love this. Go and find the tweet. It'll be about a week ago where I talk about the Labour front bench.
But, let's be honest, the Conservative front bench over the last 14 years have not had nearly enough business experience at all. And certainly not the sort of venture capital backed startup, go from nothing and really have the pressure to take something into the skies. And that's what I've been doing. And you can see how difficult it is to innovate, especially in this country compared to the United States. So, getting out of the way is the best thing you can do, because with regulations, there are always unintended consequences. And the thing is that the government doesn't measure the effectiveness of regulations. They put the regulation out, they pat themselves on the back and say, we've done a really good job at getting this regulation out. And they assume it's worked. And that's great. But a lot of the time it hasn't, and you've got to remain outcome focused, not output focused, and the regulations are output, not outcome.
Well, a lot of people that I've tried to discuss these ideas with, where I've talked about taxation being high, here it is. So I bear in mind, I did ask ChatGPT, but asked if anyone on Labour's front bench has ever created or run a successful business. Not a single one. So Keir Starmer was a barrister, Angela Rayner a care worker, Rachel Reeves was an economist at the Bank of England. Should we say for 1 month? Can we say that? David Lammy was a barrister, was worked for the National Union of Students. Ed Miliband was a journalist. So basically, they're lawyers, journalists, trade unionists, and charity workers, all have their place in society. But how can you be at the coalface making decisions that affect millions of people nationwide, small, medium businesses, if you do not understand how to run a business yourself? How can you do that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, back to my other point is when you try and discuss more libertarian ideas, just smaller government, less tax, usually it comes back with, that's just rich people wanting to have more money. And I'm trying to get across to them, no, the policies that you think are these kind of more socialist policies that you think are good for society actually harm the people you want to help the most.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel Reeves is figuring that out right now with the rise in employer national insurance, right? And a whole load of hairdresser salons, for example. One of the spokespeople from that came onto Sky News and was saying we're totally stuffed here. And I bet you Rachel Reeves. Apparently, they responded to a consultation, but I bet you Rachel Reeves never really took into account the effect that it might have on them or on others. There are always these consequences, and they just simply they don't know what it could be. And in the book I've written, obviously, that you need to merge national insurance into income tax, because otherwise it's simply a stealth tax. It's a way of muddying the waters about what people are really paying. But certainly it talks about employers' national insurance staying, but referring to it as a payroll tax. You could call it a jobs tax as well. Let's be honest about what this is. Yes, you might say you want to have the tax in order to pay for government expenditure, but let's be honest about what this is. And at elections, parties can say, let's increase the jobs tax and see who goes for that.
Well, look, as I mentioned, I had Steve Baker in here yesterday, and he's sounding the alarm of the future currency crisis we're heading for. And I've, with the podcast I've made, I've been acutely aware of what's coming. We have stagnant growth. We have rising taxation. I think tax as a percentage of GDP is up to like 40% now. We've got massive increase in borrowing. And I think it's very clear, unless we have a complete rethink of government, we are heading to a place where it will be more tax, more borrowing, and we will have a currency collapse. And I put a very naive question to Steve yesterday, which I said to him, I said, look, if I was the leader of the Conservative Party right now, and I was fully aware of what was happening, what we were facing, I would go and see Keir Starmer. I would sit down with him and say, Keir, this is the reality. This is the future projections on growth. This is the future projections on the cost of government, and this is a runaway train. I would work with you and support with you a complete rethink of government expenditure, so we bring it down, so we can drive growth, and we can reduce this debt burden. And I won't challenge you on it, and let's work together. Because if we don't, this is on all of us. Why don't we work together? It's totally a naive question, but
what does Steve Baker say?
I can't actually remember exactly what he said. I won't want to quote him wrong. But I think
I imagine he said, I doubt Keir Starmer would be interested.
Well, I think he basically said, but the problem is most of them don't understand this, which is a scary prospect. And the reality is most people just want power. And we've got to this point where the economic cycle is out of sync with the political cycle.
Yeah.
And rather than dealing with the issue now, you can defer it to the next government, and they can defer it to the next government. And it constantly gets kicked down the road. In the meantime, we are getting poorer as a nation, and society is fracturing.
Yeah, absolutely. The governments don't feel the pain in the short term. When they borrow more, it's a long-term problem. It's, as you say, it ends up being the next government's problem. And the more that we borrow, the less we actually have to spend on everyday people's priorities. And so it does become this spiral and spiral. But for each individual government, they can't see things really getting worse. They're just trying to, find the next political headline for the next budget, for example, which says, we've given free X or free Y to this set of people, and they think they're going to get a bounce from that. But I mean, one thing that I think that we learned from the last 14 years of Conservative government, and there were a lot of political games played, is that all of these political games and the headline chasing, it doesn't work.
No.
It might work in the short term, bits and pieces. You might see a little bump in your poll ratings in the short term, and then politicians think, fantastic, this was a good thing to have done. But in the long term, everyone sees through the political games. They see the pattern, and they get more and more disenchanted with politics and politicians.
Well, I think this is why most of the UK has not really understood the Trump phenomenon. I mean, I go out to America 10 times a year. I spend a lot of time in Republican cities, in Democrat cities. They're very different. I chat to a lot of people who vote for Trump or have voted for Trump. And then I've come back and I've watched this election, and I was pretty sure he was going to win. I didn't realize it'd be that convincing, but I'm pretty sure he was going to win, and I think I knew why. I've watched all the commentary online, whether it's Rory Stewart or Alistair Campbell.
A lot of Rory Stewart, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he I was surprised he missed it.
He was so convinced.
Yeah, I was surprised he missed it. And I've seen a lot of commentary, whether it's Carol Vorderman, anyone, just all these different politicians, commentators, they completely missed it, and they've missed why. And they've tried to make it about a personality contest, or I dislike Trump, but they've missed that. I think I put it in a tweet this morning. I said, basically, I think people are fed up of this shit. Populism works when people are being let down. And this is where we're at. And I feel like the UK is heading in a similar direction, where people are, the thing I would say about the Labour Party is, I think they got the vote because they were like, well, it cannot be worse than this Conservative Party. And now they're realising, oh, it can be.
But they didn't really get the vote. They got 34% in the polls, which is the lowest winning party election since, for a very long time. I actually don't know when the last time the winning party got 34%.
But it's another signal. The two signals are that people didn't want to vote for Conservatives.
They did not.
Because they were so fed up with the last 14 years. I think especially the post-COVID era.
Yeah.
And then, or people just didn't want to vote at all. They just didn't care. So you've got people who thought it couldn't get worse than Conservatives, and they're realising it will.
Yeah.
And then the other people just think, oh, what's the fucking point?
Yeah. If I may make a small comment about the American situation, the American election, really, as Trump won. He had a specific message. All of that went well. I don't want to denigrate what's going on with Trump's win, but for me, a lot of it, frankly, is about the state of the Democratic Party in the United States.
Which is very democratic.
Well, there were two big things that people really disliked about what they're doing, in my view.
Yeah.
I was actually out in America a few weeks ago, in Pennsylvania of all places. So
Battleground state.
Yeah, that was the presidential motorcade actually went past the window of the cafe which we were in, which was very cool.
I had that once when I was in Vegas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But there's 3, and two of the cars have fake Trumps in.
Yes, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, but I've got a photo. I'll show you after this where I took a photo, and I think I got the one with Trump. You just get this outline of his face, but you're like, that's definitely him.
Yeah, it has to be him, not one of the fakes.
Yeah.
But just on there are 2 things which I think really annoyed people about them. One was the way that they were talking about priorities, whether they be around trans rights or that sort of thing, diversity and inclusion, that was not going to affect normal people's daily lives. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is something where if they want to say they're there for the man or woman in the street, that they need to get back to really understanding them, listening to them. That was something when Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, I assumed they would do. They would go back in on themselves and really think about how this could have happened. But it didn't look like they were going to do that at all. Instead, they went on the attack for anyone who voted for Trump or anyone who thinks even slightly differently to them. And that was really annoying for a lot of people. And I think the other big thing is the way that, let's be honest, Trump has been going out there making all sorts of outrageous claims and things which just simply aren't true. But the Democrats call him out for it, rightly. But they also do things, it feels a bit surreptitious, feels a bit behind people's backs in terms of the way they lie. I mean, the latest one I heard was the one about Liz Cheney saying that Donald Trump had said, someone should shoot
He never
her.
said that at all.
He never said anything like that. And anyone who looks at that clip will lose trust at the clip of what Donald Trump actually said. Will lose trust.
Something along the lines he said, if you want to send people to war, you should join the army and go and fight yourself.
Yeah, I mean, he said he basically was saying, I wonder if Liz Cheney would be so pro-war if she had to face a gun being pointed at her.
Which is a fair statement.
That's that is not the same thing as someone should shoot Liz Cheney. And there have been too many of those sort of faux outrage moments that mean that people really feel that the Democrats are not the place to be. And then, what they were doing, saying it's outrageous, anyone who attacks Joe Biden's cognitive and health abilities. And then it turned out really he wasn't fit to run for president again.
We all saw it.
And it was this gaslighting going on. So Trump's not great. But these people, come on, you need to change your attitude.
Colin's just brought it up. So I love it. She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? The former president said at a campaign event. Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. He also hurls insults at her, calling her a very dumb, stupid person, the moron. I mean, that's what he does. But he's not said shoot her.
No, he hasn't.
And
he hasn't.
But this is the point. This is what I don't understand about the Democrats. There's lots I don't understand about them. But Bill Clinton got it right. He knew the far left were always going to vote for him. And there's some people who are going to vote Republican, whatever. He said, there's no point fighting for them. There's no point appealing to them with crazy left-wing ideas because they're going to vote for me anyway. He went for the center ground. And I think what Trump has done, he's gone for the center ground because I think the left has gone so fucking crazy with some of the crazy policies that there's people who are kind of like your Tulsi Gabbards, your RFKs, these are people, even Rogan. Rogan was pretty much openly a Democrat. He liked Bernie. I mean, Bernie's a commie. Yeah. But I think they've all got to this point that I'm fed up of this shit. This is all crazy. Like, we need to get back to reality. And I think what Trump did, he basically, for some people, he was like, I can't vote for the Dems. And for others, they're like, fuck it. Why not?
Yeah, let's see.
It's the vice signal versus virtue signal.
Yeah. You got 2 options. Which one do you go for? And they chose to go for Trump.
Quite significantly as well. But I feel like we're heading to a similar situation in the UK. I feel like there is a huge disconnect between the political parties and the electorate, and there's a huge disconnect between the media and the electorate. And it's this thing where I feel like there's some very angry working class people, and they're almost looked down upon.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's this like kind of condescending attitude of, you know, they're working class people. But when you had the Southport riots, what was really interesting, you had working class people next to middle class people, next to wealthy people, all upset with government. And we're now seeing the attacks on the farmers. So I feel in the UK we are fracturing. And this is why I think your book is great. And I'm going to read the whole thing now because it's very rational about the things that need solving.
By the way, have you ever heard of the dinner party theory of history? You ever come across
that?
No,
tell me.
Basically, that that events happen in history based on how people are viewed at the dinner parties they go to. So, you know, a lot of people are not going to care what the people in power are not going to care what the working class people think. They might care when they go to a dinner party in North London, what the other people around the table might think. And so there's this view that throughout history, it's actually about your own social class, the elites, and what they think and how you are viewed by them, which is how decisions get made. I don't know what to make of that. I feel like it's a little bit pie in the sky, but I think it's an interesting one.
Well, I think we're seeing a change. I think we're seeing a rejection of collectivism, basically, at the moment. I think a lot of things have failed. And it's like very obvious. I mean, I've traveled a lot. I told you I've been out to El Salvador. Bukele is a strong leader. He's got the highest approval rating of any president in the world. Really? Yeah.
It's done. I mean, I don't know the details of it, but it looks like he's brought crime down and things are starting to.
So basically, he wanted to end corruption because it was this is a problem with small third world countries. Corruption is really easy. Of the 4 presidents before him, I think 2 were in jail for corruption. 1 was hiding in Nicaragua, and I think another one was dead. And he said he wanted to end corruption. He doesn't care about left-right politics. He cares about policy. And he came in. He's basically a strong political leader, and he recognized that you have to have a strong economy and safety. And so, I mean, it was quite a policy, but basically almost anyone with tattoos was put in jail.
Okay.
But it had at one point it was the murder capital of the world, San Salvador, and he had these areas called red zones, which are run by the gangs. And just give you an idea, so I went out and visited a missionary, and what they did was take addicts off the street, and a lot of people addicted to like glue sniffing and alcohol, and they would rehabilitate them, get them back into society. And I'll never forget this conversation. We sat down, and I was like, just explain to me the gangs, like how much of a problem is it? And they said, if a gang leader came to your house and said, we want your 12-year-old daughter, she's going to come and be with me, and if you don't allow her, we're going to kill you all. They would kill you. They would just kill the whole family. Yeah. And so you had families who would leave and escape up into America. Or they'd have to give their daughter away. They had such a control over these red zones that it was just a completely dangerous country. He arrested everyone, put them all in jail. It's now, I think it's got the lowest murder rate in the Western Hemisphere.
No way. Yeah. El Salvador.
Yeah, can you check that up, Connor? I think it has.
That's incredible.
And then he's trying to make it a place to visit. So
I can't help feeling that to achieve something like that, though, he must have been incredibly authoritarian and gone past the normal rule of law and the court system and that sort of stuff. It must have not been totally above board.
There you go. Approximately 2.4 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. So in 2023, there was approximately, when it stood at 103, the murder rate has been dropped annually.
Wow.
There must be a chart for this. Click on that show more above, Con. So look, in 2020, it was 19.7, 17.6, 7.8, now 2.4.
Wow. Yeah, it's done. He's done absolute.
I've been there 5 times, right? And always felt safe. So that's one component. And yes, he was very authoritarian. I mean, he basically went into Parliament with armed guards, and I think he removed the judges, but I think the judges were corrupt. So he did a very benevolent authoritarian approach. He skirted around the Constitution, which is single term.
Okay, so he's not his second term, is he?
His second term. But it was a weird thing. Like, I interviewed him and I was like, I think I said to him, I don't think you can do this project in 5 years. And so the way he's done it, I think he stepped down with 6 months to go, which meant he could run again.
I did a Putin, basically, almost.
Kind of. And I think he will do it again. And I think the country, it's a weird one. I kind of support him breaking the constitution because I see the output. But I think he needs to put a plan in long term how he will pass power on.
Otherwise, he might end up being the corrupt politician that he's sought to undermine.
I don't see him going corrupt. There was a recent thing, a case of corruption
it's corrupt, in my view, if you end up staying for too long for your own gain rather than for the health of the country.
Yeah, I think the question is, how is he going to build strong institutions that protect El Salvador being taken over by financially corrupt politicians and judges in the future? That's a challenge. But yeah, so the other things he's done is boosted the economy. He's made it a place to go and visit. Tourism's up. They had the international surf championships there. They had Miss World there. He's engaging with other leaders. He's basically almost told the IMF and the World Bank to go fuck themselves and adopted Bitcoin. Find their Bitcoin treasury. This is wild, right? Because
I did know that Bitcoin had been taken on by El Salvador.
So the first country in the world to make it legal tender.
Yeah.
My friend Jack Mallers was there and helped them write the Bitcoin law.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was there at the same time. So Jack went off to do it. It's nuts.
And has it worked out? Because I haven't been following it. I just heard about it.
So they've been buying Bitcoin. Then at one point he changed the policy and said, I'm going to buy 1 Bitcoin a day. Bitcoin treasuries. Go down there, Connor. Up that one. Click on that. See what we get there. Yeah. So this is their. I mean, so that's the value in dollars. What does it say at the moment, Con? I can see. So that's about what's that?
5,600.
Yeah. So that's 400 million-ish. But because we had a big jump with the election. And I mean, when was that? March, April 24. Actually, go back a page. With your search, Connor, add mempool at the end. So MEMPOOL. I think. That first. So that's their address. It looks like a ladder because they buy 1 Bitcoin a day.
Okay.
So they've got 450 million in Bitcoin, but it's a highly profitable trade they've been making because Bitcoin's now at $76,000. So everything they've bought up until now is in profit. And that's a treasury that protects the country. They're doing a massive amount of investment. Look, they've got a relationship with China I'm not sure about. We'll have to wait and see. But it's the kind of leadership that people have been asking for in a country like that. And then you have Milei in Argentina.
Yep, that's different, isn't it?
A libertarian. And so whether or not we agree or think they're right or wrong, I think there people are crying out for a different politics. And I think my feeling is that they're crying out for that here in the UK as well. I think within 120 days of Labour, I think people are pretty fed up. And I sat there with what I know thinking I don't see the Conservatives having reformed enough to change the trajectory of debt. And I can see reform gaining ground, but I don't know if they fully understand the requirements to run government. So that's why I think your book's so interesting. Yeah, everything I read in it is like rational and correct. But how does that ever happen?
Well, I brought this book to number 10.
Okay.
Back in April, at March, April time.
To Rishi?
To Rishi's staff. I knew some people who worked there. And so I used the contacts to see whether they'd be interested. And there was real interest in it. Obviously, things moved very quickly towards an election. So it wasn't looked into in any detail. But they liked the direction of travel. And the way that the book has been written is it's about low-hanging fruit. You know, I've not gone in there and said we should do all of these controversial, drastic things. It's about where can we find consensus, whether you're on the left or on the right.
Okay.
And so the chapter on tax, for example, it does advocate in a general way for lower taxes, but the individual suggestions are not actually saying that you need to lower taxes in order for this to have an effect.
It's efficiencies, right?
So, yeah, exactly. So if you are simplifying the tax code, what the main point of that tax chapter is that if you simplify the tax code, you are going to be in a much better position, because it means that people spend less time on it. They'll be less stressed about it. Even if you have high taxes, that's going to be fine. And what's more, it's a lot more democratic. So these things, if you're Labour and you're thinking, I don't want to reduce taxes, the hope is that when you read this book, you see you don't have to lower taxes in order to have a much more efficient tax system. So that's why I think these sorts of things can be brought in. In the health chapter, here's another example. I've talked about how the litigation system should be reformed. And a lot of what I have written has been based on the Health and Social Care Committee from the House of Commons, which at the time was chaired by a very centrist politician in Jeremy Hunt. And these things are absolutely obvious. It wouldn't cost a lot to reform the litigation system, but it could be revolutionary for the healthcare system. And the reason for that is that the way the litigation system is currently set up is that it's about scapegoating. It's about finding the individual doctor or nurse or whatever practitioner and saying it's that person's fault. And it is in the interests of the hospital trust to do that, because it means the hospital trust doesn't need to reflect themselves. And so what you end up with is, firstly, no systemic change. You've got to prove this to a high degree. So it stays in the courts for years, which makes doctors' lives hell. It makes the victims' lives hell as well. And it makes doctors incredibly scared. And if you look at the results from doctors in terms of how scared they are in terms of suggesting that a treatment which might not be the absolute bog standard one, it's very, very high. The surveys are showing that's very, very high, which means that everyone is potentially getting the wrong advice because it is the most risk-averse advice. And so it doesn't cost money to the NHS to change that. You're just changing the decision-making process of doctors, meaning people will get better outcomes. So that's an easy thing to do. You could be Labour, you could be Conservative, you could be Reform. You can do that sort of stuff. That is how the entire book has been written.
Well, I actually ended up, when I was making my notes, I kept putting the word inefficiencies. I had it here as education, business, NHS, jobs, city design. And it's glaringly obvious. But I think it comes back to the point where I'm trying. One of the things I'm trying to say to people is we don't have a party problem. We have a government problem. This government beast has grown and grown organically to suck up all the life out the productive parts of society. And I look at it now. I think I see it quite clearly, Thomas. I look at it now, and I saw Kemi get elected. Not got a particularly strong opinion of her, and I thought, what's going to happen now? This is what I think will happen over the next 4 years. We'll have 4 budgets, which will either see more taxation or more borrowing. I don't see a scenario where there's a reduction in taxation and like a net reduction. And so if that's what we're facing, we'll have another election in 5 years. And the Conservatives, will fight a good battle. And either Labour have done such a bad job, they'll be single-term party, or they get re-elected for more of the same. If the Conservatives win, they'll come in. And I think they'll make, maybe some tax cuts, to win us over.
You don't think it will change?
But I think the trajectory, and I think Reform will get more of the vote, but I think trajectory-wise, like Steve Baker told me yesterday, we have an issue with our debt system, amount of debt, and we are not driving growth and productivity. Yeah. And therefore, if we are stagnating but an increasing debt burden, we're going to end up like the US with, what's their debt? 36 trillion now. We're at 2.2. The problem's going to continue, and we're going to end up with a bond crisis. And I see it pretty clearly, but I'm like, how do you get 60 million, well, how many voters are there? 50 million voters to really understand this? You can't. How do you have an educated public who really understand how the bond market works, understand debts and deficit, understand inflation, interest rates, when they understand that, when Labour make particular policies or Conservatives make particular policies, what the real impact on them is? How do you have 50 million people understand that?
I don't think you can. I do a lot of door knocking for the Conservatives, and I can't imagine myself going to, door to door and saying, well, think about the bond market. Here's how it works. I don't think that.
But the bond market can cripple us.
You can make simpler arguments.
Yeah.
Like, did you know that we are spending more repaying wealthy investors than we do on our schools?
Yes.
And our hospitals? We have to stop doing that. We have to get out of that so that we can I want to spend double the amount on schools and hospitals. We can do that once we release ourselves from the chains of these debts. And people understand debt. They do understand that, which is, David Cameron did it in 2010, right? He did talk about how we've gone way beyond our means, and now we're having to pay back debts, and we have to bring that back cut the deficit in order to get to a better place. So people they can get that. They really can if you push the message hard enough. The problem honestly, in the end, everyone gets tired of a bad message, right? Yeah. And David Cameron wrote in his autobiography that one of his biggest regrets was not cutting further, faster, because he said we were going to get completely hammered for it anyway. We should have just done what Ireland had done, and then we would have...
What did Ireland do?
They cut hard. They cut massively hard. As soon as it happened to them, they had a deep recession, but then they came out of it and had much faster growth than the United Kingdom did at the same time. Whereas the UK government at that time, they were very, very careful about what they cut, and they said they would get the deficit wiped away within 5 years, but they didn't.
How much did they cut into it?
They cut a lot into it. Yeah, I think they got it down by something like 2/3. Okay. But they did not get it down to where it needed to be. And then the problem is that events happen and Brexit happened, COVID happened, money was needed for other things. People had got tired of austerity.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, even that, if they got the deficit down by 2/3, but we were still running a deficit.
Exactly, we were still running a deficit.
When did we last have a surplus? I mean, it's 30 years ago.
Yeah, it was under John Major, I think.
Jesus. That's interesting one. I keep bringing up the interview. Did you hear the interview John Major did with the guys, the Leading podcast?
No, I didn't.
It's worth listening to. I was too young to fully appreciate John Major. I just saw the spitting image caricature of him as being boring. Actually, he's a fascinating guy. I didn't realize he came from a working class background. He grew up in Brixton. But he became a conservative, which I always find that's quite interesting. But he said the problem with politics now is they used to get, and I'll get this slightly wrong, but he said you need a strong Labour and a strong Conservative to pull against each other. But the Labour politicians used to come from the unions, or they used to come from the working class, and the Conservatives used to come from business or the military, and they used to come with experience to be strong, powerful leaders. He said, what we have now is career politicians who start as student politicians, and they've got no real world experience, and they end up having influence in government, but they're essentially unqualified for the job.
Oh, 100% right. I mean, I don't think that's our biggest problem overall, but
just one of many.
It's just one of many problems. And working in PR for a large corporation, I'm thinking of David Cameron with that one. It does not mean that you understand how the private sector works. It does not mean that you understand how to build a business. Certainly not from the ground up. And that is something that people really do not. That politicians really do not get. Yeah.
What was your background? So you say business, but you're a counsellor. What's the trajectory that happened?
Well, I am in business at the moment.
Okay.
But I'm doing the council work in my spare time, basically, and it's not easy to find that to find that time. But due to the wonders of modern technology and teams, and I have flexible working hours, I'm able to do that. But I have spent my entire career building businesses from the ground up. I left university having studied social policy with quite a few very left-wing politicians. And by the way, in terms of whether someone should go to Keir Starmer, the leader of the Tories, should go to the Keir Starmer and say we should have a rethink. My professors at university were saying, well, Japan's got a debt to GDP ratio 250%. They're doing fine.
They're not.
We've got a long way to go. It's going to be absolutely fine.
This is a professor.
Oh yeah. These were my professors at university.
I mean, they're fucked, Japan. I mean, they've had what, 3 decades of stagnation?
It's not been great for them at all. No.
They've been bailed out. Is it twice this year for the currency?
Yeah, I didn't know that, but
I think they tried to do like a slight change on their interest rates or their bond rates. They let it get totally out of control for sure. Japan's fucked.
So if you actually hear what people on the left are really thinking, they believe that this is conservative, right-wing, free market nonsense. The fact that we have to stop borrowing. They think that we can continue borrowing way beyond the 100% mark. And that is why you would never get through. I don't believe that you would get through to Keir Starmer and say, this is going to work. But anyway, that's where I started. I was at university, and I that's what I did, social policy, and it was a great time. And I flew to Finland for my dissertation on Finland's education system, which is world renowned. So I learned a lot through that, and then I went into the business world, and I knew I couldn't be a small cog in a big machine. I couldn't face it. That wasn't what I wanted to do.
And I empathize.
Exactly. So I immediately thought, but I was highly ambitious. So right, startup world. That's where I want to go into. And I immediately went into a startup, which ultimately it's done well for itself. It's not done hugely well, but it's, startups often fail, right? This one didn't fail. It succeeded. It sold last year for a good amount of money to a senior player in their industry. I carried on after that. I set up a network of business experts with a co-founder. And we built that for quite some time. We did actually run out of money, but we only had 300K of funding overall. And with that money, we did pretty well to get FTSE 100 companies as our clients. So, and then there was the crypto, there was the neobank that I mentioned before. That was a very interesting journey. And then I moved on to the place where I am now, which is about wealth management. And that company started £0 of assets under management in March 2020. Right?
What a time to launch.
What a start. And the markets were going through the floor. Yeah. And the founder was thinking, wow, this is not a brilliant time to have started this business. But here we are all of this time later, and it's the amount of assets has gone beyond £6 billion.
Holy shit.
It's looking to do incredibly well into the future as well. It's looking to become one of the largest in the UK in its area. So I have been through this many times in my career, and I've seen what works. And I've worked for lots of different. I've also worked for large organisers. I worked for Chelsea Football Club.
Yeah, are you a supporter?
I'm not. I'm actually a Liverpool fan because my mum comes from Liverpool.
That's right, we support Liverpool. Liverpool's our second team.
And it was a bit awkward in the interview with Chelsea, but they let me in anyway. And I work for BDO, which is a large accounting firm as well.
Yeah.
I've seen what business means for large, for small, for growing, whatever have you. And I've been doing the counsellor work on the side because I find it to be incredibly impactful. I chaired a subcommittee on homelessness in Buckinghamshire recently. and the suggestions that the subcommittee made were taken on board, and that means that potentially hundreds of people across Buckinghamshire, maybe thousands over time, their lives can be better based on what we talked about. And by the way, the main suggestions that I put out for homelessness were: we need to start measuring our success, and we need to start using technology. I actually talked about using a CRM system that can be used by multiple different organizations, and they know for an individual person who's vulnerable to homelessness, they can see where in that funnel of homelessness, how close are they to being on the streets. And so they know using data, they'll know when they need to intervene and when not to intervene. They can measure their success using KPIs. This is all very business speak that was kind of a bit weird, right? But it was it's important.
Well, in the book, you talk about thinking about government like a systems engineer. Because at the moment, it to me, government is just I don't know how to explain it, but it doesn't appear to run like I would run a company.
Not at all.
If I showed you my laptop, if you open up my laptop, my browser, there's about 10 spreadsheets that permanently exist. And they're all the metrics I need to know about the health of each of my businesses: cash flow, income, P&L, and with all those things, I can at any point I've got a snapshot of my business. I know, how we're doing, and we try things, we test things, we measure them, see what works, and does that improve the business? But it feels to me government runs slightly different.
Very different.
It feels like it doesn't understand what it's trying to do. It's throwing money at problems, and then it's only picking the results it needs to win public opinion, rather than actually reporting what's really happening and the impact. And if you do economics, you study this thing called diseconomies of scale. Something gets too big and it becomes inefficient. I just think it's a big fucking inefficient mess.
Yeah, it is.
But everyone recognizes it now.
Oh, I don't know whether people are recognizing it.
I think they are.
I'm not convinced that people are ready for a libertarian future. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but they've probably not heard of it or understand what it means.
They might not do, but I don't think that Britain is in a similar place to Argentina with Milei.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to sell it as a libertarian. It's a bit like you said about knocking on doors and saying to people, understanding debt rather than talking about the bond market. I think it's the same. I think you can talk to him and say, "Oh, do you realize that GDP, the stuff we make, and the productivity of this country, over 50% is going as being taken away in tax. Do you think it would be better to have a smaller government with less tax?" Because I think these are things that can appeal to everyone. I think if you had a Labour voter, a Conservative voter, a Reform voter, you said to all of them, these are my main political goals: is to increase safety and security, build a stronger economy, and reduce taxes so you all have more money. Who would disagree with that?
But it's nowhere near as simple as that. I mean, two examples that come to mind immediately. One is, if you were to be cutting government spending drastically, you would need to do a lot more decisions like cutting the winter fuel allowance, and see the reaction to that one. Another one is the pasty tax and the bedroom tax. These weren't actual taxes. There was the pasty tax was a VAT change, right? It wasn't specifically let's go out and tax pasties, but that is the way it was perceived, and so it's not easy.
No, I agree. But it found a way to become so big and efficient. It needs to find a way to unwind itself.
It's very hard to do that. Yeah, it's very, very hard to do that. In somewhere like Argentina, they were so desperate. It was so clear that it had failed for such a long time, and inflation was so unbelievably high. They really got to a place where they felt that it can't get any more difficult. In the United Kingdom, Labour and Conservatives, well, certainly this Labour government and the previous one, very, very good at managed decline, managing it, not doing what happens in Argentina, which was just letting it fly.
Well, I mean, look, Milei's ripped the Band-Aid off.
And he has, but we wouldn't be able, because you wouldn't, it's going to take a long time for us to get anywhere close to what happened in Argentina.
But just as a thought experiment, if Millet came over here and said, I'll write your policies for you, I think he would find a way. I think the first thing he would go for is probably the NHS. Not completely scrap the NHS. I was just out in Australia, and they've got a very interesting model whereby if you earn over a certain amount of money, you are incentivized to have private healthcare. If not, you face a taxation, which is slightly higher than the private healthcare. It's not perfect, but you have that competing private and public health services. And that kind of edges people away from reliance on the state. And private healthcare usually always is better than the public system.
It's a very, very difficult thing to message to send through, though, because certainly if you the debate about healthcare is it going to be free for all, or are you going to make people pay for it, and then people who can't afford healthcare don't get it and they die?
But it isn't free for all, is it? But our NHS is not free for us all. It's about 10% of our personal and 12% of business, or 15%.
That's right, but it does make sure that the poorest are able to pay. Or at the start of my healthcare chapter, I put an example of how there was this one boy who was totally unable to. His future looked very, very bad, and there was this one unbelievably expensive medicine, £1.795 million. This thing cost.
Wow! And NICE didn't approve it,
and the NHS bought it for him.
Oh, they did? Okay.
And his life is looking better.
Great.
And his mother, there's a quote in the book from his mother who says, this is game changing. That is the power of the NHS. That's what it can really do. Where when it comes to our bodies, it's not like a latte from Starbucks, where if you choose not to have the latte but go for something cheaper, or just not go to Starbucks, it's fine. You don't have to. We don't have a choice about which illness we end up getting. But
I don't think we should get rid of the NHS. That's my point. As I just think it could become more efficient, run better.
It can be, yeah.
And we should. There are. When I had my advertising agency down in London, we set up a private healthcare system for all the employees, and it wasn't too expensive. It was a nice kind of benefit. And then when I closed the agency down, I decided to keep it. And at the time, for me, my son and my daughter, it was about £180 a month. So it's not a huge amount of money. I know not everyone can afford it, but in that time we've had it. My son had a shin splints issue. He was seen by one of the best consultants in London almost immediately. I had a herniated disc on my back. Within 3 days, I was in surgery in a private hospital with my own room and looked after really well. And I went from being unable to sit down to being able to walk again. And it happened quickly and efficiently. It was well done because it was part of the private system. I think there's a lot of people out there who can easily, if you can afford Sky Sports, you can afford private healthcare. And I would say, having had both, private healthcare should be your priority. Much bigger priority than Sky Sports. And so I just think we could edge more people into the private system, take the pressure of the NHS. I think we could do other things like in Ireland, you have to pay for your doctor's appointment. It's £50, you have to pay for it. I don't know if they have a safety net for people who aren't working, but again, that waste. I mean, what was it? Something like 12 million appointments a year, and people don't go to. There's just my thing about the NHS is like every election, it's like we're going to give another 20 billion to the NHS, and you look how much more money's gone to the NHS, but wait times have gone up, outcomes have reduced, so it's not working.
But in healthcare, I do think we're looking in the wrong place.
Okay,
everyone is talking about the NHS, whether it's got the right structure or the wrong structure, or how it should need reform and things like that. Do you know what I think it's the lowest in the OECD, in the Western, what you might call the Western world, even though it's not in the West at all. The lowest, the country that pays the least on their healthcare in the Western world as a percentage of their GDP. Do you know what it is?
Please don't tell me it's us.
It's not. No, it's not us. It's not us. It's. I can tell you, it's Japan.
Okay.
And do you know which has some of the highest?
But Japan. Sorry, just on Japan. Is it lowest because they have a very good lifestyle? Well, very good. They eat well.
This is exactly what I'm saying in the chapter on healthcare.
Yeah.
Which is that we're looking in the wrong place. Japan has a very similar socialized medicine system that we do in the UK. Really, really similar. Now, it turns out that in terms of the cost they pay for the amount of beds in their hospitals is much more efficient than us. So it shows that there are absolutely efficiencies that can be made in the NHS for sure. But the bigger thing is the lifestyle that we have.
Yeah.
And
what's the obesity rate? Come on, will you look up the obesity rate in Japan?
It's very, very low. It's very, very low. I've not been to Japan.
You don't really see fat people. Everyone is skinny.
And there are so many parts to this, but this comes back as well to the chapter I've written in the book on urban design. One of the reasons for that is that Japanese people, they walk something like double the number of steps on average than the average British person walks. So you're looking at the
so
the
obese
rate.
BMI greater than 30 is 4.5%. Overweight BMI of 25 to 30 is 20%. Can you compare that to the UK, Con?
Hopefully the AI overview has given us the right numbers, not hallucinating.
But it's lifestyle. We have a shit lifestyle.
But this is we have forced ourselves into a bad lifestyle with the way that we built our cities.
5.9 for these.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean,
is that 500% more?
It's totally different.
Yeah.
But when you force people to have a car to get anywhere, when you do this zoning, which means that you have residential areas where shops and offices are not allowed to be, so everyone has to get in their car, whatever they need to do to get to their office. It's not going to lead to people doing the right number of steps, the right amount of exercise each day. Whereas if you create these walkable, pedestrian-first cities. And you have what's referred to as gentle density. So it's not sort of one-story bungalows or 2 stories. You're talking about 3 to 5 stories, terraced housing, and you have some which is office buildings. You've got shops. You've got town squares where people can congregate. It means you have enough footfall on your high streets. It means people can walk to work. It means that public transport can get where it needs to go more easily, and there's much less need for cars. And when you have less need for cars, and when you design the streets, especially with a curvature, which means that you can't see the vista, it means that cars drive slower, and the slower that the cars drive, the more walkable the places are. And it's things like that. We think of our streets and the squares around us as just these things which are there. It's not a political issue at all. It's not true. These things are absolutely key to our health and happiness. And that's not me just saying that, by the way. There's been a massive study by the University of Warwick, which has been able to correlate, to be fair, not causate, but there's a strong correlation between where people live and them living in beautiful, livable, walkable places, and their happiness, which is incredible. And they took into account the socio-economic effects of, the other things in people's lives. And it shows you just how important this stuff is. Urban design, that can help us with healthcare, unbelievably. And things like exercise. The Japanese, they have something called I think it's called Ragio Tai. I've almost certainly butchered that pronunciation. But it's where it's like three minutes a day. Everyone who's in an office building somewhere in Japan, they will get up and do this exercise. It's on the radio. People do it in offices. People do it in parks. People do it in their own homes. And it's millions and millions of people do this every day. Now, I'm not saying that is culturally right for us. No. But what I am saying is that we can experiment our way to living more healthy lifestyles with more exercise, better quality food. There was you
don't think we should just give everyone a Ozempic?
Yeah, that's the cheat, right?
Isn't there a test being done in the north of England? They're giving gym memberships to people. Can you look that up, Con? I think there's a test being done.
And that's the thing, there's a test. Now, the hypothesis is if you give people gym membership, they will go to the gym. I'm not convinced that's going to actually happen. Yeah. But if you experiment with lots of these different ideas, you start to pick out the winners. And the world's greatest innovators who've built, the co-founder of Netflix said it actually, but Elon Musk has said it, others have said it as well. They know, and the quote from the co-founder of Netflix is that nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what they're doing, and nobody can predict the future. And therefore, you've got to have humility when you're building. That is how Netflix got big. That is how SpaceX has done so much more than NASA over the past 30 years, because they start with a hypothesis, they don't assume it's right, and they try and validate that hypothesis as fast as possible. If we do that in the public sector as well, with lifestyles, I heard about restaurants' menus. There was an experiment done on that about changing what you put on a menu will change people's choices to be more healthy choices. There's all sorts of things that we could do.
Sugar tax?
Sugar tax is generally, I'm more on the liberty side of things than the not liberty side of things.
Apparently it's worked though, hasn't it led to...
But I've heard that it's worked.
Because they've reformulated, right?
I honestly don't know the details of it. But generally speaking, everything is a balance, right? Sometimes a tax is the right thing to do. Sometimes something else is the right thing to do. I try and avoid taxes where possible, to be honest.
Yeah.
But we should be experimenting with this stuff and finding out what works. And we can find out very quickly what works and start to scale those things quickly. And that would be way better in terms of our long-term spending on healthcare than shoving a whole load of more money into the NHS, which it just gets eaten up immediately and you never see any real benefit. Whereas you look at Japan, they spend way less, but their health outcomes are way better. And that's what we should be going after, in my view.
Have you spoken to planning departments?
Of course I have. I'm a counsellor.
How's that gone?
Well, they do their best, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy being a planning officer. There's all sorts of local plans and neighbourhood plans, and then there's the national policy framework. So I don't know where your question is going on that one.
It's like, rethinking our towns and cities. That's a big job. So when I look through some of the things that you've talked about, I think rethinking the tax code could happen quite quickly and efficiently. You could just rewrite the tax code and just force that through. But to redesign, rebuild cities feels like something that takes years, maybe decades. Mm-hmm. And so there's quick wins and there's long-term wins. And even on those planning the cities, what's the role of the planning department? What's the role of developers? Like, how do we think about these things? I mean, around where I live in Bedford, there's a lot of house building at the moment, all around the edge of the town, to the point where the town centre really can't cope with the pressure and the traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, Con, how long does it take you to take Scarlett to school and back? An hour. And
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But it's a 10-minute drive if there's no traffic. But all these houses that are being built around it, they all look the same. All these little collection of houses. They'll have a brick house, then they'll have like a kind of like a sandy yellow house, and they'll have one. And they're trying to make the houses look different, but it's not. It's
not
just
working.
It's repeat. And in the middle, you get a little Sainsbury's local, or Tesco local, and maybe a local cafe, and they're all starting to look the same. It's quite miserable, really.
Yeah.
It's quite miserable. So I don't. When I look through your book, I'm like win, 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 win. Redesigning cities, I'm like, that's going to take a long fucking time.
I'd say that redesigning city, I think yes and no. Our cities, the old cities and villages that we've got, were built in this way. And
is that an organic thing though, rather than like being planned? Is the problem is actual planning?
For sure, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Again, the book refers to, it quotes our king, actually, King Charles III. He wrote a book called Harmony, and he talks about an area in India called Dharavi, I think is what it's called, in Mumbai. And it was it's a slum. It's a slum.
Yeah.
Actually, if people want to find out more about it, James May talks about it in Our Man in India.
Okay.
And people don't want to leave this place. It's a slum that people don't want to leave. It has been organically built and has small shops down its streets. It's got lower crime than in some of the other places around in Mumbai. It's got its own finance sector, and it's got a very, very strong community. Think about how our communities have been decimated over the past 70 years as urban design has forced us apart. That's the sort of thing that can change. So our original cities, which were organically built, they absolutely can be easily repurposed back to their original purpose. What the important thing is to get out the cars, get out the concept of zoning. This is already happening in Paris. There's this socialist mayor, Anne Hidalgo, I think her name is, who's making the centre of Paris be a no car zone. And we're going to see what a difference that can make when you pedestrianise places, is my view. But the other part is really easy as well. Every council has a design code that they can make. You've got neighbourhood plan design codes. You've got Buckinghamshire Council's doing a design code, and if you set out the urban design principles in there, then you can make sure that all of these new houses that Labour is planning to build over the next 5 years, these are going to be around for the next 100, 200, 300 years perhaps.
So get it right now.
You've got to get this right. So I'm not saying that it's going to you can immediately change everything, but there's a lot that you can change in urban design at a very low cost.
But it's not, when you say not change everything, the thing was, again, I go back to your book, and I was reading the part at the start. It was, we have high anxiety rates with young girls. We have depression with young boys. We have stagnating economy. We have high, almost accepted corruption. People just accept corruption now. We have high tax. We have, crime seems to be, I think violent crime is down, but crime seems to be up. We have a cultural divide now at the moment. There is a certain aspects of certain political parties are very much struggling with the idea of immigration. What does immigration look like? What should it look like? There's some scapegoating with Muslim communities. I mean, I can give you this big list. It's like everything appears to be a bit fucked. Like, where do you start? But I go back to the point. I said, I think people are sensing this. I talk to friends. I mean,
they can sense that things aren't working. That's what Labour said at the election, right? Britain's not working. Vote for us, because the Conservatives haven't done it.
But they all do this. Every time it's like, vote for change. Things aren't working.
Of course they do.
So basically, every government comes in and said, it didn't work, we'll fix it. And they never fix it. What's this? 56% of employees are experiencing symptoms of depression. Female employees are 20% more likely to experience symptoms of depression. 61% of employees aged 16 to 24 experiencing symptoms of depression. I mean, what's this? This is employed people. We have a massive young population who aren't even working because they've got depression.
Yeah.
And it's just like, everywhere I look, Thomas, I'm like, where do you start?
Well, there are so many parts which are wrong, but it's about, each part of the book can be done simultaneously.
Yeah.
But there's no silver bullet. You've got to do all of these different things. So urban design is isolating people rather than bringing them together. So you've got to deal with that problem, but it's not a silver bullet. You've got... We've never attempted to bring empathy into our children. To everyone just assumes that there's nothing you can do about it. Either you have it or you don't. That's not actually entirely true. There's a lot you can do to build empathy in people.
You have to start young, right?
Actually, you don't necessarily even have to start young. But obviously, if you do start young, it will be improved. But can you imagine if we did build empathy in our children, how much warmer our society would become? And those statistics there, people would have more support. The likes of depression and that sort of thing would go down. I also think, though, that there's very little to believe in anymore. People have moved away from religion, and I can't say that I'm a particularly religious person myself, but the move towards existential nihilism is something that I think is causing people incredible angst, and
a lack of national identity.
I think on top of that, and sort of connected to that, is it's part of this. I want to believe in something bigger than myself. Right? That's what everyone wants to be part of that. They want to believe, and part of that is national identity. Part of it is also religion. And the national identity part is failing because we are going through a period of managed decline, a long, long period of managed decline since the end of the Second World War. And we've got to change that if people are going to believe in this country, if they're going to believe in us actually having any relevance in the future of the world, in us as a people doing something useful. I think that is also important. And then you've got the other things like obesity, which is causing people's health to go through the floor. You've got social media, which is causing our children's health to go through the floor. So none of these things are silver bullets by themselves. But absolutely, at a relatively low cost, you can start to tackle all of these areas together, which in a short space of time together can lead to a much, much healthier society. That's my view.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page as you. Part of the not traveling anymore is like improve my own health. I get up and go for a walk in the mornings now, right? It's like I didn't used to do that.
Right?
It makes a difference. It sets you up for the day. Go down the gym and I have a sauna. I'm trying to eat better. I'm going gradually more carnivore. I'm trying to not have food that has any ingredients in. I'm trying to go to single ingredient foods. I'm trying to, just generally. I've been thinking of getting rid of my iPhone because somebody said it to me. Have you ever seen Aliens?
No. I don't think
okay,
I've
the film
seen that.
Aliens is basically the alien. What it does is it clamps to the face of the person, and then it as like it impregnates them with I don't know if impregnate's the right word, but
Sounds disgusting.
it's like it puts the alien inside of them and then it bursts out. But this idea of Colin, if you try and find the alien, is it called an xenomorph? But it clamps to the face like a parasite. And I was with my buddy out in LA recently, and he basically said, "This is what iPhones are."
Yeah, I've heard that analogy before.
Yeah, they're basically camped to our face, and they're sucking our soul out. And obviously it sounds dramatic, but it's kind of like, I think you might be right.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Every spare moment, if we're looking at a phone, doom scrolling on Twitter, or what are we actually doing to us? Yeah, here, that's basically said that's an iPhone. What's it called? Face huggers. It's got a name. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. No, I know. People sometimes ask me, how the hell did I manage to write this book while I'm doing while I've been doing other things? People would be amazed at what you can achieve if you don't use social media, if you don't watch TV. I don't have a TV at home.
Wow.
And if you're really focused on doing something. I geek out. I love this stuff. This is my watching a TV series. That's why I wrote it. So I think that people's productivity could go through the roof if they realize how much they were doom scrolling. How many hours do you really think about it? How many visits?
Have a look. See what I've done on Twitter. To scare the shit out of myself.
All of the listeners at home, how many hours are you doom scrolling on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is?
It says my daily phone usage is 10.5 hours, which is majority of the time awake. But I think some of that might be misleading because I have
be misleading
because I'm listening to like Spotify and things. But
yeah, exactly.
Let's see if I can actually see on a normal day. What does it actually see at webinar? So here we go.
It also helped, to be fair to especially listeners at home who might have children, it also really helped that I wrote nearly all of this book before my wife gave birth.
So my daily average on Twitter is 3 hours 15 minutes.
3 hours 15
I could
minutes.
write a book in that time.
That's on Twitter.
Yeah, on Twitter. On
there
X.
you go. You could write if you stopped using Twitter altogether. You could write a book in 3 months.
I just get ChatGPT to write it now. No, I mean, look, I'm becoming cognizant of it. I think other people are. Like I say, I think it's like a waking up, and people starting to realize like things aren't right at the moment. Yeah. And you add into that, we've got this, another big issue, the lowering of the Asian population we have. We've got lower birth rates. These are all issues pointing in a single direction. And it feels like we need, like, I don't want to be dramatic about this, but almost like a cultural revolution. It's like a waking up moment. Say, look, what are we building here as a country? And where are we heading? And what do we want out of it? I do always come back to the economy, though. I think you have to start with a strong economy.
You do.
With a strong economy, and if people feel, I don't even think it's feel. I don't want them. I think you have to have people avoid feeling gradually poorer.
That's what everyone's feeling, for sure. And it's actually not that hard to do some basic things around the economy without even reducing taxes.
What would you do?
Well, as I say, the tax simplification piece that you've got in there is really important. I sound a bit like a broken record, but I go back to urban design. What people don't realize is that 20% of United States GDP comes from walkable neighborhoods in its top 35 metro areas. 20% comes from these tiny urban areas. And if you think about the city of London, right, which is this 1 square mile, which makes so much for our GDP. If you think about Silicon Valley in the United States, which has a higher GDP than Finland, just that small area of the United States, you start to see why Arlington in Virginia is another one, which is a walkable area. You start to see how it can be that these small walkable areas, to be fair, Silicon Valley is often not so walkable, but it is a very small area where there's this agglomeration center of innovation has come together. Those are the sorts of things that make a difference. And you need agglomeration centers, just to be clear. And in the book, I've suggested several agglomeration centers. Knowledge hubs, knowledge clusters, you can also call them, which is sort of everyone, the world leading experts come together in one place, and you've got universities, you've got private sector, you've got a highly skilled workforce. They all come together to produce something more than the sum of their parts. That is how Silicon Valley has done the amazing thing it's done. That is how the Square Mile has done the amazing thing that it's done. You see the same thing in Tel Aviv and other places like that. And that's what you need. I suggest one about green tech around Oxfordshire, because it's got the foundations for that already. And I talk about in the Northeast, you can have one around the defense industry as well. And I talk about how if you create these tax incentives and you build these agglomeration centers, especially the one in the Northeast around defense, we spend so much on defense and it is so poorly spent. What you're really missing there is the economies of scale that you need in order for every pound that you spend to be spent well. And for the economies of scale that you need the private sector, and you also need the companies, the shipbuilders, for example, to be building the sorts of vessels that the private sector want, as well as the ones that the public sector wants, that the defense sector wants. And that means compromise. That means not having necessarily the same ships as you would otherwise go for. It might mean a different way of thinking about that. And when I ran this, the defense part, by the way, past a man called Mark Hansian, who's a senior advisor at the CSIS. He used to work for the White House under Bush and Obama as a senior military advisor, specifically on procurement. His point is that even the United States military, in a large-scale world war, would be reduced to a regional powers force within 9 months. And the rest of the war would be fought using equipment, vehicles that have come from the private sector and that can be produced at scale. We even saw that in Iraq. There was this, I can't remember what it was called now, but there was a special tank that was built there. That ended up being built at scale, and that's what they mostly used in Iraq. You see it in the Second World War. It wasn't the Spitfire that won us the Battle of Britain. It was the Hurricanes that could be mass-produced. You see it in the tanks. I can't remember what it was called now. There's a special tank that the Americans built that was nothing special, but it could be mass-produced. And so you need to get into this feeling of an agglomeration center that can make a lot of money for us as a country by building up the economy in the defense space. but also in shipbuilding space and that sort of stuff. But it also saves us a huge amount of money in defense. These are the wins that we can do. It's not about spending more money. It's about spending it way more efficiently and getting much more out of it.
And just enabling the private sector.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, look, I'm not going to do it. There was a period of time I was thinking of running for mayor in Bedford because our mayor
Why not?
Our mayor is a moron. He's just, I don't know why he's done the job. He's completely unqualified. He has no experience. He's from a farming background. I think he just wants to wear the outfit all around town.
So it's a cool outfit.
Well, he lacks a basic understanding of business. But I don't think I could do this as a mayor. But what I would do for my town centre, if I go into Bedford, like I say, we've got empty shops, and the town centre is kind of like shape and designed. It's changed a bit in that we have like little mini markets now in the town centre, which we didn't used to have.
Yeah.
And we have obviously the betting shops, a lot of charity shops. Again, not against charity shops. They perform a useful. Task for the town, but you know, if you get in a lot more charity shops, that's a signal.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely
remove business rates. I would create an economic zone within a town centre. I would remove business rates for any locally created business. So your Costas and your Starbucks and your Subways, they still have to pay business rates because they're sucking the money out of the town and they're sending it to
somewhere else.
Yeah, somewhere else. I would support local business. And so I'd say, if you are a local independent business, if you're a resident within the metropolitan area and you create a business here, there's no business rates. And the second thing, I would then create the loans for people to create businesses.
Yeah.
And I would because then what you'll have is a bunch of people locally maybe working in miserable jobs and don't know what they're doing. They think, I could set up a florist. I mean, there was a florist in the town centre. It's closed down. I wonder if it had no business rates, whether that business would have survived.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. And I would incentivize. And then what happens is you get these nice little shops in the town and it grows. And you think, do you know what? I want to go to the town because I want to go to the florist and I want to have a cup of coffee in that coffee shop and I want to go to the bookstore. And suddenly you're driving people into your town centre rather than, right, we need to go shopping. Let's go to the edge of, I hate those edge of town retails.
Yeah, absolutely.
A JD Sports and a sofa. It's fucking miserable. Or, you know, what we do is like, well, let's go to Milton Keynes because there's a big shopping centre.
Yeah,
I want to go to my town. So you have to incentivize people to do that.
No, I totally agree with that. And the principle I couldn't agree with more. As I set out in, I think it's like exactly chapter 1 pretty much of the book about helping small business. But I have to admit, as a councillor, the first thing I think of is, okay, no business rates. What are we going to do as a council? Because every council is now massively struggling financially.
Why? Is it social care?
It's social care.
Is it 70% of the budget goes to social care?
It's more than 70% of the budget, and it's going up. And what you've got is this totally unsustainable situation where David Cameron put in this rule that you can only increase council tax by 2%. You can add a little bit more, I think, for a social care remit, but it's not
council
much.
Tax is, it's 4.9%. If 5%, it has to go to referendum, right?
If it's more than, I think it might be more than 2.99% has to go to a referendum, but then you're allowed to add something on for social care. I'd need to look at the
because I know
details
our mayor
again.
has just raised it by 4.9% and it didn't go to referendum.
Yeah, that's right. So you can. There's a sort of one part, and then you can add on another part without it going to a referendum. But the problem that you've got is that. If you're only allowed to increase it by sort of 4% or up to 4.95% each year, that sounds like it's going to cover inflation, but it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Because
because they lie about inflation.
Well, specifically for councils, because
Yeah.
the inflation rate for adult social care is way higher, and the inflation rate for building roads, you know, bitumen, is way higher than the normal inflation rate. The normal inflation rate does not apply. And so you get to yourself, each year, every council has been cutting. Yep. And it gets to a stage where the proportion of the budget being adult social care keeps on growing because you're not legally allowed to reduce it.
Connor, can you just try and find Bedford's budget and adult social care? So I'm interested in this because, again, you're saying this as somebody who also said, I'm not a fan of raising taxes.
Yeah.
And we've just had a 5% rise in our council tax on top of the latest round of tax changes that we've got from the Labour government. Social care feels like it could be like another endless bucket. It sounds to me like almost social care needs fixing.
Social care does need fixing.
So if it's more than 70%, say it's 80%.
It's for Buckinghamshire Council, it's 72.
72%. Okay. Yeah. What is the breakdown of that social care?
That's social. So it's adult. So that's adult social care plus children's social care. The total thing is 72%.
And so children's social care is those who are living in difficult circumstances. Maybe parents are drug addicts, alcoholics, or disabled, or
so some of it they're living with their parents, but some of it they're living. The state looks after them, which actually means the council is looking after them full time. That's incredibly expensive, and adult social care is also incredibly expensive. And the regulations around what councils have to do means that it's very, very difficult to reduce spending on that. Indeed, if you speak to a lot of people who are in the social care sector, they would say that there's not enough money. So it's I don't know enough about that area in particular to make a large comment on it, but I know that it's getting more and more unsustainable for local councils.
Yeah, I would love to know. I'd be intrigued to know where the money's going. Where is there? Which areas are growing? Which is is it addiction? Is it old age? Where's the budget going? Because that sounds like something that is unsustainable.
Yeah,
as it is.
And I have had several presentations by the adult social care team, but I can't give you the insights right now off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I just know that it's growing, that it's unsustainable. And the other thing, of course, is that councillors like me, got to be totally honest, I know that it's there. I know there's not much I can do about it. And what voters want from me as their representative is to fix the roads. It's to make sure that they can send their kids to school in the school bus. It's to make sure that their bins get collected. And that's where I spend most of my time. It's not so much in the adult social care, which, to be fair, and this is one big part of what I've written in my book, is that you need accountability for there to be any way to improve anything. And as soon as you lose that sense of accountability, you no longer really have the chance to improve things.
We have so many councils who are either going broke or on the brink of going broke. Here we go. So is this for Bedford, Connor? So adult social services is 98 million, so that's 37% spend. Children's services, 67 million, 25% spend. Housing funded primarily by rent and service charge, 40.8 million. Council support services, and then waste to recycling. So this is their total budget. Okay, so Jesus. So the stuff that appears to be outside of social care and health, waste and recycling.
Look at roads. Yeah. That's what everyone cares about. It's 3.7% of the total budget.
Yeah, so 3.7. Economic growth and planning is 5. So that takes us to 6.1. Libraries and leisure 7.1, 7.8. Public protection and safety. I mean, all those things. You want libraries and leisure. You definitely want economic growth. You definitely want public protection and safety. Yet we're being swamped by adult and children's services, council support services. I'd want to dig into it. I'd be really intrigued to spend what adult social services, what that 98 million is. I'd be intrigued to know, because but are they costs that are coming because of this fracturing of society? Is that downstream of that? Is it mental health? Is it homelessness? Is it is it women leaving abusive relationships? I know it happens to men as well, but is it that because people are feeling there's alcoholism or drugs because of people feel helpless? Like, is this downstream of all our economic issues? I think it potentially is.
Well, certainly the isolation piece is big. It's also partly that we've got an aging population, right? And so you're going to have more people in care from the state than in previous generations. But isolation is a big one. There was a TED talk about how people who have strong social networks do not take drugs and do not end in having drug problems. Now, actually, obviously, there are some people who are genetically much more likely to have that. That's not the only factor in this, but it's certainly a big factor. Those with strong social networks, they don't do that. And so again, I have to say, it goes back to our urban design. If you force people to be isolated in their own homes, it's going to be isolating. And then people, who are really in a bad shape, they might look for community online, find all sorts of extreme
weird shit
and weird places that take them down to really bad places. But an online social network cannot replace ever the feeling of real friends and family. And we talk about our declining birth rate. I know this is a totally separate topic, but it is weirdly connected. Talk about our declining birth rate. There's a phrase where it's, it takes a village to bring up a child, right?
Yeah.
And we've now got to a place where the family is so nuclear, and even the nuclear family itself is breaking apart.
Yeah.
That it's incredibly stressful for parents to be bringing up children in today's society, and they can't take them to the grandparents because of how the grandparents are 2 hours away down the road rather than just down the road from them. There's so much about this where the whole way that the fabric of society is breaking down, and it's causing all sorts of these problems.
Well, how do we make this popular then?
How do we make it popular?
Yeah, because I agree. I mean, look, I think fix the economy is fix the way the government runs the economy would be a good starting point. I think we need to drive growth, and we're not going to do that by taxing people more. I think this endless more tax and more borrowing is a broken system. I mean, I've told you, I keep all my money in Bitcoin now because I believe in sound money standards. Have you gone down the sound money rabbit? Not even Bitcoin, just generally.
No, I don't think this is a movement, is it? Sound money?
No. But I mean, it's a historic movement. We used to be on a gold standard. Connor, bring up that what the fuck happened in 1971, and let me show you a fascinating website. So
that's the Bretton Woods. That's when Bretton Woods came in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we came
break down, was it?
We came off the gold standard. Nixon wanted to finance Vietnam War.
That's right.
And so this website, it's just got a number of charts. Once we came off the sound money standard and we gave government the ability just to print money endlessly.
Yeah.
And so you see there in 1971, if you look at growth in productivity and hourly compensation since 1948, I mean, from 48 to 72, productivity and compensation is pretty much consistently growing together. We came off the gold standard. Productivity since then is up 246%, but compensation's only up 115%.
Yeah.
It's because we have this massive misallocation of capital, and so anyway, keep going, Con. So this is really interesting. So real GDP per capita is pretty consistent, with its dips, and you got the global financial crisis in there, but keep that one there, Con. Pretty consistently. But if you have a look at average real wage and then real wage growth, it's becoming almost stagnant.
Yeah.
And this is this kind of like when you give government the printing press for money, they will print money to solve the problems, because it's what's popular and what's not popular. Rising taxes is not unpopular. When you stand out in front of, Rachel Reeves says her budget, every single tax rise is unpopular.
Yeah.
But when they say the increase in borrowing, it's kind of nebulous,
Yeah, it's nebulous.
So you kind of just don't really understand it. Oh, they're borrowing more money. Oh, well, how much have they got? It doesn't matter. They'll get paid at some point. I don't think people really understand the inflationary tax that we pay.
No, they don't. They don't understand that.
Keep going, Con.
I want to go back to that chart in a moment. By the way.
But I mean, there's just so many of these charts, and it all stems from coming off the sound money standards that we had, that the world that regulated the issuance of money. And this is why we've got a bond crisis coming, because there's no faith in the currency. Because it's like what happened when Liz Truss, her famous mini budget.
Yeah.
I think she had the right idea. She wanted to drive growth. Okay, great. Let's reduce
But
tax.
through borrowing.
Well, it was reduction in tax and reduced borrowing, but no efficiencies in government. So at that point, your message to the market is, we're basically going to devalue our currency. Okay, bond rates are going to shoot up. Well, we want more, we want a higher yield, and that's why it crashed.
Yeah.
But this kind of sound money standard is, I think it enforces a discipline on you. I mean, you essentially live personally on a sound money standard in your house.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a mortgage, and you have you maybe have a car loan, and you have your income, your outgoings, and if you want to go over that, you take out a loan, you have to pay your loans back, and if you don't, your house will get repossessed and you're on the street. So you have to live on a sound money standard. I do, Connor does, Kurt does. The guy drilling out in the street below, working on the roads, thanks mate, he's having to do it. But the government doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can just print as much as they want, and they can push the liability for that debt onto the next administration and future generations. It's why we have a different kind of housing crisis. We have a housing crisis where houses have become assets.
Oh, for sure. They should never be assets. They're commodities.
Yes.
That's always been a problem. I've always been against this concept that they should be some sort of investment.
I'll give you an interesting number. My son wants to buy a house, right? Or a flat or whatever. A flat in Bedford that we've looked at is 2.5 times the price of the house I first bought 20 years ago, which was a 3-bedroom house with a garden. That is asset inflation. Anybody who makes a decent amount of money, they know they can't leave it in the bank, and they have to put it in assets.
Yeah.
And that's because we have this just ridiculous system where the government can print whatever the fuck they want. And I think that was a bit that was missing in the book for me. It's like, where can we put constraints on government debt?
Oh, I think I'm not sure you can. You just seen it, right? The Conservatives put certain constraints on government debt, and as soon as Labour got in, they changed the fiscal rules.
To borrow more.
Because that's the thing. Parliament is sovereign. The government is because they control Parliament. The government is sovereign, and they can make whatever rules they want. I'm not sure that you can constrain them. But one thing which I just wanted to go back to this chart on, which I find very interesting. You see how GDP is increasing, but the real median weekly earnings are not.
Yeah.
The politicians and everyone, the journalists, everyone will always be focusing on the wrong thing if we are measuring our success in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. We are currently all the time measuring our success based on nominal GDP. Mm-hmm. And as long as we keep doing that, certainly by itself, the longer we will go in the wrong direction.
Should it be inflation adjusted first?
Well, I got a quote here from David Cameron from his book, which says, people might look back at those years of economic growth under Labour between 1997 and 2008 and think that surely something must have gone right. On the face of it, they would be correct. The number of jobs did increase, but over 70% of them went to workers from overseas. If you took away immigration in the public sector, the number of jobs had actually fallen since 1997. And there was growth, but this was primarily in the size of the state, which increased in a decade from 34% of GDP to 45% of GDP, faster than almost any economy over the same period. So the problem with GDP is that it takes into account government spending. So if the government increases its spending by 5%, you have increased GDP.
Yeah.
Just by and so as long as you use that particular measure by itself, governments have a strong incentive to keep increasing spending no matter what. It also does some other weird things.
So you really just want private sector GDP?
Well, even then, it's not brilliant. In 2015, I'm just reading here from the book, Ireland's GDP jumped by 26% inside a year, only because Apple changed its accounting affairs so that a large part of its business activity was suddenly counted in. But that doesn't mean that Ireland's people was 26% better off because of it. Not at all. And the other part of GDP is that it measures consumption. So if you buy 10 plastic bags, and they're not reusable, there's 10 plastic bags, rather than one bag that will last you for your lifetime. Mm-hmm. GDP will grow more because you've bought all of those non-reusable plastic bags and
Wasteful
start
consumption,
spending.
yeah.
And so again, that doesn't mean that you've gained more value or that the economy is in a better position. Actually, if we all consumed less, we might actually find ourselves in a better position than in the consumption society we're currently in.
So what are the good measures then?
So I do believe that you've got to use GDP.
Yeah.
You always want to do it in a per capita basis, and you should also look at it as well in a purchasing power parity measure, whereby you are able to compare apples and apples against other countries to see how you're doing internationally, not just by itself.
Okay, so inflation adjusted GDP per capita, and then you would want to plot that against what other countries are doing.
That's one thing, but the other part is exactly what was on that chart there. If you just bring that chart back up, you've got the real median income. So that is actually how people are feeling.
Yeah.
When they're thinking about how are things going better for me or not. And basically since 1971, things have not been going better for them.
Connor, have you got ChatGPT? GPT, sorry. You haven't. See if you can get it up. Just I want you to try something in there.
That's the thing that people should be looking at. That's the thing that journalists, that politicians should be looking at. Are people's standards of living going up based on the core parts of inflation? You know, housing and food and that sort of stuff.
That's why inflation is. I think it's one of the biggest cancers we're dealing with, and we're going to have to continue to deal with. If they continue to increase borrowing, and they're going to continue to increase spending, then we're going to see more and more inflation.
But if you have that measure of real median income, and by the way, you can also measure real bottom quintile income to make sure that the bottom part of society are keeping up, and you're not just increasing the gap. But if you do that, it's taking inflation into account. So can you imagine if politicians, they had to measure themselves against whether real median income as well as GDP per capita was improving. Suddenly, they couldn't just get away with things going well because inflation has gone up and no one's really thinking about it. If inflation's gone up, that's actually causing a drag on people's real median incomes. And they would make different decisions, for sure.
Try this prompt, Con. Say, can create a table showing inflation-adjusted GDP per capita in the UK for the last 30 years.
It has gone up, but nowhere near as much as nominal GDP.
Okay. All right, and then just tell it to put it in a chart. It's a bit ChatGPT, it's been super useful.
Yeah. It's just doing, it's not the chart, it's not a graph.
Sorry, line, say put it in a line graph. I mean, the amount of time now I use ChatGPT now. I can't do it.
You can't do it.
Yeah, you can. That's so weird. I got it produced. Why did it say it can't? Because I've had it do it for me before. I can't generate. That's weird because I've literally had it do it for me.
Weird.
Just say. What do you think? Yes, you can. My dad just showed me it on his computer. Honestly, I talk to it like it's real. Have you actually talked to the ChatGPT? Use the voice?
I have. Yes, I have.
Amazing.
It's getting more.
You're
and more
absolutely
real.
right. I can help you create the chart directly.
Outrageous.
But now it's just giving you the plot. Hold on.
Oh, is it? I think it might be.
I think you've broken it, Connor. All right. So anyway, let's go back to the table. Just scroll back. We'll come back to that later. But yeah, so from 1994 up from £22,000 GDP per capita, scroll down to 39,000. Okay, so that's fine. But then who's that going to? That's what we want to know. So
that's the problem. Yeah.
Can you now ask it? Can we have the medium?
The real median income.
Real median income, again, in a table for the last 30 years.
In the UK.
Yeah. For the UK, make sure, yeah. It's weird because the charts I've been putting in my blogs are ones that have been created on there. So scroll down.
You'll see that there's been very, very little change, especially over the past 10 years. There's been almost no change at all.
Yeah. And I think people are feeling that.
People are feeling that. And then if you were to look at the bottom quintile rather than the median, you know, I actually don't know what that particular chart would look like, but it's not okay to be leaving behind the most vulnerable in our society. And currently GDP does not measure that in any way.
Yeah, I'd also want to know like the percentage of income in these different bands, what they're spending on groceries, what they're spending on fuel, what they're spending, because I'm sure a lot of them are going up.
Yeah, for sure.
I just feel like disposable income is being squeezed because the middle class is being squeezed, and I think these are the kind. You know, when you see at the dispatch box, you see people, government debating. This is what I want them debating.
Yeah,
I want them to put the charts up and say, "This is the impact. How are you going to fix this? How are you going to fix this?" And almost because we need an educated public that understands these things and has the expectation, like expects this from our politicians. I also think we need media to do a better job.
Yeah, the media, they often do not understand statistics. I'd love to see a situation where there's a qualification for journalists which is so focused on being data driven and not just accepting any statistical metric that they might come across, you know.
It's mad. So I told you we've got a football club. Data is foundational to everything we do.
Fantastic.
Completely foundational. Like on the business side, we track how many people come to a game, what they spend money on per item, but category: food, snacks, alcohol, soft drinks, merchandise, programs, the average spend per person who comes, the average profit per person, whether it's a midweek game versus a Saturday game. Like we track everything so we can drive more people to come and spend more money at the games. But we also use data we're starting to use more and more data with performance. We want to know how many times we got into the box. And when we got in the box, how many times we created an opportunity. Of those, what percentage were goals? Again, foundational for knowing the players we want to sign and to try and win games. It's foundational to what we're doing. We've won back-to-back promotions. We've won the title.
Fantastic.
If we win the league this year, we'll be only the third side in the history of English football who've won 3 titles in a row.
That's incredible. That's football manager stuff, isn't it?
Nobody's done 4. Our women's side have done the same. It's foundational to what we do. Our goal is to get a team into the Football League, ultimately the Premier League. People laugh at us, but we have a trajectory, and we've got billionaire co-owners as well.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, the Winklevoss, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, who've invested money in us. And so what I'm saying is, like, data is foundational to us being successful.
For sure.
But our success, Thomas, is measured in trophies and promotions. Data is foundational for governments, but it's foundational for trying to find the messages to prove to the electorate that you should re-vote for them, not based on trying to prove to themselves that they've done a job.
Yeah.
Because it's public sector versus private sector. We're incentivized in the private sector. We want to make a profit because we want to buy a new car, a new house. You know, we want the money. But within government, they want to retain their position.
Yeah, but I actually see that as not so different from one another. Most politicians, this is what we were talking about, political games before. They think that the whole thing is a game. Can they catch out their opponent? Can they deliver a witty line? Can they get the next headline? And that might work in the short term, but even then, less than they think it does. If you're actually improving people's lives and you focus on that instead, then you can make a massive difference inside 5 years, and people will vote for you again. And when people see that you're not doing these political games, which frankly blow up in people's faces and they look like hypocrites or they look like they don't know what they're talking about, they stopped doing that, I honestly believe that they would get more and more voters coming their way, even if they might not be aligned. I remember early on, 2015 was an example of this. When I was knocking on people's doors for the Conservatives, sometimes people would say, I don't agree with you guys, but the Conservatives are competent, so I'm going to vote for you. So you would get that. And obviously, since 2015, people have felt less and less like that with the Conservatives. But it does show you can get people on side just by being competent.
Well, listen, I'm going to read the book because I was fascinated by skimming it. And sometimes I get a book for an interview and I skim, so I know what to talk to the person about. And, I don't go read the book. I'll be reading the book. Probably can make my boy read the book as well. I honestly, I think you're on the money. I hope you can get this in front of the right people, and I hope it's the kind of book that can drive the kind of change we need, because I'm worried about where we're headed. Everything seems to just be getting a bit more shit. And, all that's going to happen is good people will leave the country, and we will continue, we'll carry on this trajectory of more social fragmentation. And it's not good. So, well done.
Thank you very much.
It's a place to call home, available on Amazon.
It is.
Is there
indeed.
an audiobook?
No, I haven't made one yet, but yeah.
Are you planning to?
If there's enough demand for it, yeah.
I mean, you can get AI to do it. You can literally 11 labs. You can go into 11 labs, I think it's called.
Really?
You can upload your voice, half an hour of your voice, and it will dictate the entire book for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That will lead to a lot of deep fakes.
Deep fakes are an issue as well. But it means
But
that...
it sounds good. It sounds good.
Well, it means
for
you
this.
don't have to spend 10, 15 hours recording it.
Yeah.
It does it for you. But no, congratulations. It's a great book. Great to talk to you. And I hope we do this again sometime.
And thank you very much for having me on.
No,
Real honor.
All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you soon.